On July 28, 1996, two boys discovered a skull as they walked along the Columbia River in Kennewick, Washington. Anthropologists excavated the site and studied these remains, and with the use of radiocarbon dating, they determined that this was a 9,000-year-old skeleton, one of the oldest remains to ever be discovered. This was truly a revolutionary discovery, and anthropologists were eager to learn more about its origins, but their studies were halted by the Native Americans, leading to decades of controversy over who would obtain rightful ownership of the skeleton. A major political debate ensued to determine who were the rightful owners of the Kennewick man, the Native Americans or the anthropologists. While the debate between the Native Americans and the anthropologists was being disputed, the remains were held at Burke Museum at the University of Washington. The Native Americans believed that the Kennewick remains belonged to their ancestors, and they wanted to give the Kennewick man a proper burial. Before identifying an owner of these remains, we must consider the cultural and scientific history leading up until this point. In the 18th century, early anthropologists Johann Blumenbach and Samuel George Morton founded methods to determine and categorize the differences of races. Johann Blumenbach used over 82 samples of skulls to classify the human race in the categories of Mongoloids, Caucasoids, Negroids, in addition to other oids. He believed that all humans began as Caucasian, then deviated based on their environment. This assumption led Blumenbach and others to theorize that observable racial differences had arisen after the creation due to racial degeneration. Samuel George Morton also studied skulls, but he believed that multiple races were created and did not derive from the Caucasian race. Both anthropologists believed that the Caucasian race was superior to all others because they determined that all other races were less intelligent based on the size and shape of their skulls. It was believed that the Indian race was not capable of becoming civilized. These scientific statements supported and enabled Caucasian Europeans to devalue, enslave, and murder the Indian populations. With this lack of respect for Native American culture, anthropologists continued their study of skeletal remains by obtaining skeletal collections in brutal and completely immoral ways. Scientists often depended on grave robbers and armies of men who would attack Indian villages. They would desecrate burial grounds and mutilate innocent people, removing their flesh, and their skulls and bones were sent to museums for research. Since the arrival of Euro-Americans on their land, Native Americans have been stripped of their land, culture, and their beliefs have been violated. As Native American cultures became less and less relevant in the civilized world, it was believed that the Indians would only survive if they were culturally assimilated into mainstream American life. The most controversial factor of the Kennewick debate was whether or not the Kennewick man was actually of Native American descent. The notion of cultural authenticity goes far beyond the study of DNA. The most important factors in determining who is authentically Indian are your family history, cultural influences, and your own perception of who you are, which is the core of your identity. When discussing archaeological finds, it is important to consider all possible factors before labeling a find. In dividing up skeletal and cultural materials, NAGPRA states that cultural affiliation was to be decided by the evidence based on geographical, kinship, biological, archaeological, linguistic, folklore, oral tradition, historic, and other information or expert opinion. In the debate of the Kennewick man, it is unfortunate that politics has played such a significant influence in determining the true ownership of the remains. Although the discovery of the Kennewick man was a revolutionary scientific discovery, some values of the Indians should be prioritized over research. Considering the factors of cultural assimilation, identity, ancestry, and scientific notions of race, along with the brutal historical treatment of Indians by the Euro Americans, I have been led to believe that the Native Americans deserve rightful ownership of these remains. The Indians considered the remains to be sacred and saw the digging up and desecration of remains as a disrespectful violation of their religious beliefs. According to the Native American Grave Protection and Reparation Act, if human remains were found on federal lands and their cultural affiliation to the Native American tribe can be established, the remains will be protected. The Umatilla Indian tribe claimed custody of these remains, arguing that regardless of what scientists may try to prove, their oral history goes back over 10,000 years, and their people have been present on that territory since the beginning of time. In a congressional hearing, it was determined that DNA proved that the Kennewick man was in fact closer to the modern Native American than to any other population worldwide. On February 17, 2017, the remains were returned to their rightful owners, the Umatilla ancestors.